All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to, this is post week 7 of our the weekly sync ups for TCL 21. So good morning. Thank you all for being here. This is going to be a bit of an interesting week in that we have a guest star. Andrew is here. He's going to give us the the ally talk for accessibility, which I'm actually quite looking forward to. In the meantime, I am running demos this morning for this week. I don't know how much of stuff we actually have to demo right now, so I think maybe it's good to just talk through where we are at in terms of the evaluation of the tools and the libraries and the stuff we wanted to do, and maybe kind of crystallize and formulate a little bit more of an attack plan. And I say that also knowing that we're missing 2 members of the team at the moment, so it looks like Tamara and Taryn are both not here right now, so we'll want to be extra good about communicating with them when we get out of this meeting to ensure that we're kind of all on the same page. So that being said, and we are going to go into demos mode, who has, I know that Vanessa, you opened the PR for the material stuff. And I actually merged that this morning because it just looked like dependencies and like it's not going to hurt anything to move in. So I just pushed that in there. So it's in there and ready to go. Do we want, first of all, I know we talked about something like Figma and the mood boards and that kind of stuff. Do we have anything that we want to show along those lines and kind of the things that we were thinking about and looking at? No. Cool. That's fine. All right. So I guess not. So I guess the question is then, do
Vanessa almost looked like you might have. Were you?
Well, I was gonna say I couldn't find it. I did post a little markdown file of potential color schemes and fonts and stuff, and now I'm having trouble finding it on Slack. But I could show that if.
Cool. We could do that. Adam, do you have anything else to demo also as well while we're in the?
No, I mean, nothing particular. I mean, I think, yeah, what Vanessa did, the color scheme and stuff looks good, and UI stuff all looks good. So I agree on that, but yeah, nothing to actually demo.
Okay.
So this, this is still kind of, this is only maybe the second time that we've even had this issue on the board. So I'd be super interested to hear from the 2 of you about just how it went this week. Like what kind of meetings did you have or conversations did you have with your team? Was the the instructions in that ticket, is that useful? Was that kind of, did it give you some direction on how to approach this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the instructions are very clear. I think we understand what to do. I think we met earlier at Mindy's office hours and we all talked through what we kind of want to do and kind of figure stuff out. I feel like we haven't actually sat down and started working on it yet, which is, I think we just need to get that in the diary and start. And I think it's all pretty straightforward from there. Yeah, I think it's really just, we just haven't done that yet. We just haven't found the time to do it, but that's on us really. I don't necessarily think there's any kind of issues with the actual issue itself or anything like that. I don't know if you agree with Vanessa or have anything different.
Well, I guess I was a little unclear just about where we wanted to end up. I thought at the beginning of the week, I think we had more asynchronous communication, right? Hey, what do you guys think about libraries? And people were chiming in. And then, I'd pop this mood board in. Maybe Thursday, it was the first day we actually got together to chat about things. And so, I don't know where we wanted to end up necessarily. And I think maybe it was a tough week in that because people are working asynchronously, it's kind of hard to be all right, everyone have your mood boards by Tuesday. Well, maybe that can't happen, all right, well, now let's vote by Thursday. What do you want? Again, it's just hard to put those sort of deadlines that you might need to make all those decisions. And I think it's been kind of an intense week too. Some of us are starting new jobs. I think Taryn had another intense week of interviews. So that kind of made it difficult. So I think it kind of had to be a lot of just Slack communication. But yeah, I don't know. I could share my screen too, just to show off.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, sure.
Mood board thing. well, really just like had some adjectives of like, yeah, what we wanted. And we kind of discussed that last week, just this real clean, simple. I really wanted like a calming look. So it shows lots of blues. Use the Coolers app. You guys probably have heard of that. I love that app for just generating color palettes. And then I knew we wanted some like red and yellow for our list for those items, you know, that we'd create different algorithms for. So I tried to choose colors that also fit with those. I don't know. Again, use Coolers to get like the color theory behind the board. And then chose different fonts here for headings and text. Used like I like the Google fonts where you can like mix fonts together and see how they look. And then, yeah, just kind of like design some buttons down below, what those might look like.
Cool.
So yeah, pretty simple. I had thought like I could do this like on a markdown, and then we could have like one branch of just like a bunch of markdown files, because I know in like readmes I'm able to create HTML elements, but it seemed like it didn't work when I was trying to create these HTML elements. Juan helped me out realize that, I guess. With this markdown file, it wasn't like loading correctly. So I just have an image here. It's not on a branch, but
Well, I know
able to share that.
GitHub's markdown renderer it's not like a full markdown renderer, as I understand. So there are limitations into what you can do on GitHub that are necessarily what like the full power of a markdown file allows. So
Hey, something to learn. It's great.
I like that. I like the way that it looks. I think that you know, that achieved kind of the goal of giving us a common place to go and look for, you know, what colors do I need to use in what situations, which is always a nice reference to have. And I think that that's you know, great and kind of exactly what we wanted. And at the same time, isn't bringing in the overhead of, you know, these massive or you know, complicated tools, which are great, but you know, you have to learn a whole new thing when you go and do that. So I kind of like the pared down approach of, you know, kind of putting something in a markdown file that everybody can pretty easily consume. So I actually thought that was a pretty great approach. Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts on that thing? Adam, did you, I mean, you know, you said you kind of liked it. Is there anything you had thoughts wise on this type of thing?
No, I think that's a really good job. I definitely like the color scheme. I'm a big fan of Tiffany blue. I think it looks good. Yeah, I mean, kind of, I think it's good just to, I think it all works and everything looks nice. And yeah, ticks all the boxes for me.
My only thing would be to check the color contrast on a couple of those the buttons, the white on Tiffany blue and the white on the apricot, and see if those are accessible, or if there's another way to. There's some tricks you can do to make it more accessible. Like you could use like a text shadow or something to give some definition to the text, like on the apricot.
Cool. Awesome.
That sounds like a good idea.
This looks great. I think we should probably move on to the lesson portion of the sync today. I do think we probably want to have a discussion about what we need to do kind of next to get where we want to go, and I think that'll be kind of the later part after that. But I am also at the moment super curious to hear accessibility stuff. There's such a wide range. There's so many things there, and I have seen so many people blow it off in the professional industry. So I am super interested to see, kind of the perspective here on how to kind of bring it in and do it.
Juan, you had your hand up.
Yep, sorry. So just one quick note about the headings. I noticed that you added some headings there, but you didn't add the size of the fonts. So maybe it's good to add the size there. In that case, you can like create a nice typography set for the whole design, the whole site. So like you can define, like, there is something called golden ratio in typography, but it's not something that you need to use right now. But it's good. There are some tools for you to see how a page would look in different sizes, how the headings work on that. I'm gonna send a link later so you can try that out. Maybe that could help with the app. That's it.
Thank you. That'd be awesome.
I love the golden ratio. It's a math thing. It's like a nerdy, like you can really dig into it and get real nerdy about it. And I love it. It's one of the fun intersections of math and like everything else, because the golden ratio comes up like all over the place and it's wonderful. The end.
All right, bear with me for just a second while I get all my windows. What in the world even happened? Zoom is completely gone. Okay, there's some Zoom. There you all are. Move you over here. I wish Zoom had a way to like just set a configuration and always go back to that configuration. That would be amazing. Anyway, all right, I stalled long enough. Okay, so super excited to talk to you all about accessibility. I'm really curious just how much do you know about it already? Like, is this something that was covered in your boot camps or anything? Is it something you've kind of read some articles about? Like, what's sort of your starting point, your level of knowledge now?
Yeah, I didn't really know much about it. It wasn't really covered in boot camp. I remember though when I first read, was like kind of learning HTML and just before I went to boot camp, a lot of the books and stuff I read talked a lot about accessibility and how important it is. But I kind of didn't really think about it since then, and it's not something I've thought about too much since, to be honest. So I'm definitely keen to learn more.
Cool. Vanessa?
Yeah, my bootcamp didn't really cover it. I think maybe occasionally a teacher would say something like, oh, your headers, you should make sure you have H1, then H2. Don't just skip around to like H6 or like little things like that. But yeah, it wasn't really covered. So it feels like this like mystical other like genre that like I really want to know about. So I'm so excited. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Good. Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty high level overview, but you know, hopefully it gives you a little bit of information and you can use this to kind of find some other places to explore and learn more. Let's get one thing out of the way. So when you see this a11y, a11y, that's just short for accessibility. So there are 11 letters between the A and the Y. So it's not ally, it's accessibility. It's just short for that. It's like a contraction or something. So you see this in other places too, like internationalization is I-18 and localization is L however many numbers and that kind of thing. So anyway, so yeah, so when you see that hashtag, that's what that means. Observability, yeah. So what is accessibility? So I mean, the sort of dictionary, is Wikipedia a dictionary technically? I don't know. The Wikipedia definition is that web accessibility is the inclusive practice of ensuring there are no barriers to prevent interaction with access to websites on the World Wide Web, which is a really archaic way of saying that, World Wide Web. Nobody says that anymore. People with physical disabilities, situational disabilities, socioeconomic restrictions on bandwidth and speed. So I think a lot of times we think of, you know, a person's blind. I mean, that's like kind of the thing that we think is like, oh, how can someone interact with the web if they're blind? But there are a lot of other things that are also considered barriers to access. When a site is correctly designed, developed, and edited, generally users have equal access to the information and functionality. So it might not be the same experience, but they have the same access to the information. So the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, maintains a working group dedicated to accessibility. They have standards that they publish. In the United States, Section 508 of the can't remember what act that is. Anyway, Section 508 of some law that got passed 20 something years ago requires government agencies to make websites accessible to people with disabilities. So stuff has been around for quite a while. There are, you know, there's lots of sort of formal information about it. People make whole careers out of being accessibility specialists. And that kind of thing. So to continue with the what. So some people with disabilities access websites using assistive technologies. So that could be a screen reader, a screen magnifier, speech input, assistive keyboards. So, you know, some people actually literally navigate the web through a joystick that they manipulate with their chin, as an example. Braille displays. So there are people that they read the web by they have their hand on a little machine that dynamically creates Braille, and that's how they read the page. So there are lots of ways that people actually access your web pages beyond sort of what we think. Like, it's kind of funny because we're in this mode where we're doing this whole design exercise, right? Like, oh, aren't these colors pretty and stuff? And there are a bunch of people who won't ever see the colors, but it is important still to address to have something that looks nice, but also kind of addresses accessibility. So one of the, kind of I guess the default thing that we all think about is sort of screen readers. So a screen reader is literally, it will read parts of the page to you as you're navigating around the page, and actually your whole computer. So the Mac has VoiceOver built in. On Windows, NVDA is probably the most popular screen reader because it's free. JAWS is another option. It's quite pricey, but it's also it's very good. So those are some sort of the most popular tools for this kind of thing. So why do we pay attention to accessibility? So it is kind of the right thing to do to provide equitable access to information. So there's kind of a moral argument to be made. You may be legally obligated to make your website accessible. So if you work for the government, there are laws that say you have to make this information accessible to people. But there's starting to be legal precedent for, Domino's, I think it was several years ago now, got sued for their website not being accessible and lost. So the weird thing about that is that they probably spent more on the lawsuit than they would have fixing the website. So it didn't make a lot of sense. It was really bad PR for them too. So, anyway, so private companies even can get sued and lose over these issues as well. So that's sometimes a strong argument to make in your workplace. More people just in the United States access websites with assistive technology than all the people that live in Canada. Apologies, Juan. But some people estimate that 20% of website visitors have some sort of disability. We're going to go over what those different aspects of that are. So, and the last other kind of compelling argument too is that making your pages accessible for people with disabilities makes them more accessible for everyone. This is the classic curb cut example where, curbs at intersections didn't used to have the little kind of ramps or whatever. But as soon as they were in there, everybody started using it. So it's not just a person in a wheelchair, but it might be a mom with a stroller or an older person who walks with a cane or something. It's much easier for them to use the curb cut, right? So same kind of thing. If your site works with a screen reader, by default, it also works with just the keyboard. So you can tab around and do everything from the keyboard. So if you have, maybe you have repetitive strain kind of syndrome or something where it's really hard for you to use a mouse because of the hand position, you could still get around the site just using the keyboard. So it it's kind of helps your power users. So so those are a few of the reasons why we do this, why we pay attention to it. So the other, I kind of mentioned that there are different aspects of disability. So I think most of us, I know I used to think when I heard the word disability, I thought of someone who's blind or deaf, or maybe they aren't fully mobile, they're in a wheelchair or something like that. But there are other aspects of this. So, if you have an arm injury, now you're kind of equivalent to someone who only has one arm. If you have cataracts or something, which, you can have surgery and have those fixed. But when you have those, you're essentially a lot like a blind person, right? So there are these temporary ones that kind of come and go. And then there are even this other class, which is just situational. So, if you are, I love the bartender example, right? Like you're in a noisy place, it's really hard to hear. It's kind of similar to being, maybe partially deaf or something. So I think what I love about this kind of the persona spectrum here is that this shows that we all are in this situation at different times. And I know just as I've gotten a little bit older and I didn't used to wear glasses and stuff, I start to bump up the fonts, not gonna lie. So, it's like, it kind of does come, eventually affect a lot of us. And, there are some other disabilities that are more, that are super common, like color blindness and things that are, a lot that you wouldn't know by kind of looking at a person. So So that's why. So y'all are developers. I'm sure you want to know how do we do this? How do we kind of make our sites better? So the first place to start is always using valid semantic HTML wherever you can. So, structuring your page, smartly. So, using headers for heading out, H1, H2, H3 for headers, and using, lists for lists, and just all the things that kind of, whenever there is a tag that kind of matches the type of thing that you're trying to get, show to the user, present to the user, use HTML that matches it. You can't always do that. And so sometimes you do, I'm going to skip to number 3 here. Sometimes you do have to use these ARIA attributes. But as Jeremiah Estevez at the New York Times says, the best ARIA is no ARIA. If we use semantic HTML wherever possible and use that ARIA, those ARIA attributes as kind of a fallback. If we can't provide the right semantics through the HTML itself, then we use ARIA to augment what we're building.
Adam and Vanessa, do you know what ARIA is? Because I didn't before Collab Lab.
Yeah, let me.
No, not really.
Yeah, it's accessible, rich internet applications. It's so it's a set of attributes that define the ways to make your content and applications accessible to people with disabilities. So there's a whole slew of attributes, but as an example, this is actually a terrible example because there's actually a progress there's a progress HTML element. But anyway, so in this case, we give it a role, progress bar, the current value, the minimum value, and the max value. So there's a bunch of others. I haven't actually looked at this page in a while, but there are a whole slew of attributes that you can apply. I'm going to do a demo to kind of show some problems, and it'll actually kind of raise the fact that it's not as simple as just looking at the ARIA attributes and saying, oh, that sounds like the right thing, because there are rules around like what elements can take in ARIA, like different types of ARIA attributes and that kind of thing. So there's a little bit to dig into there in terms to use ARIA correctly. But good call out, Mindy. So that's semantic HTML. Always use alt attributes on your image tags. So you don't always have to include any text in the alt attribute, okay, which is maybe a little counterintuitive. But your image tags, back in the day, back a long time ago, and I think you can actually still do this, there was a web browser called Lynx, Lynx, and it worked in the terminal. And so it was literally just, it was like going to an old like BBS or something, it's like just all text on the screen. And whenever you didn't have an alt attribute for an image, it would just have in brackets image in all caps. And it was really jarring to kind of see this. And you're like, oh, I wonder what that is, And so that's sort of like me as a mostly not disabled person, my experience of the web through Lynx was what sort of gave me a lot of empathy for, someone on a screen reader is going to have a similar experience where if there's no alt attribute, it's just going to say image. And the person's gonna be like, oh, great. I wonder what I'm missing, But so whenever you can, or whenever what's in the image is actually sort of germane to the page. So if it's information that the user could benefit from, put in the alt attribute, put some text that kind of describes, tries to describe what is in the image. If the image is purely decorative, if they're not going to be missing anything, if they don't hear, a description of it, then leave it blank. So leave the alt attribute, alt equals just empty quotes. And that way the screen reader will know to just skip over that element and not announce it to the user. All right. Ensuring all content is reachable via the keyboard is a prerequisite to screen readers being able to access the whole page. The way screen reader software typically works is that when you're focused on an element, it will read it to you. So if you can't get to it by the keyboard, if you can't see, you can't use a mouse to navigate to it, right? And if you can't get to it by the keyboard, you can't focus on it, then it won't ever get announced to the user. So I've seen this firsthand. When I was I'm still at Zapier. We'll see, about a year and a half ago, we had a page, we had a manual accessibility tester, go through and look at the page, and he got to a certain point of the page, and we were like, oh, you skipped this thing, and he's like, he tried everything, every trick he knew, and he'd been using screen readers for 20 years or something, and then he couldn't get to the element, just literally couldn't tab into it. He couldn't hit tab or space or any other like arrow keys or any of the tricks that he knew to get in there. So it was basically just invisible to him, which is a real eye opener for my engineers. So we went back and we fixed it. We actually implemented a suggestion that he gave us, which was a more semantic HTML element, which had all the behavior we needed to sort of built in. And then when we came back to retest it, he was able to interact with it fine. So it was really eye opening. So yeah, make sure everything, you can get to everything via the keyboard. Ensure content and tab ordering makes sense. So if you were to look at the page with no CSS and read through the page, does the order of everything make sense? That's one way to do it. Links was also good for this back in the day because it literally just showed you stuff in the order the HTML was delivered from the server. So tab ordering is a little bit more of a nuanced kind of thing. So by default, the browser gives pages a tab order. So if you just sit there and hit tab, it'll go from element to element in a certain order. It's really tempting, like on a form or something like that, to start futzing with the tab order and setting it manually. It's almost always a bad idea to do that. It's better to try to rearrange the HTML so that the tab order makes sense, and then use CSS to put things in the place where you want them. But it is an option. You can say tab index equals and give it a number, and the browser will follow those numbers in order. So anyway, the thing you want to make sure happens is that if a user is tabbing through the page, they're not jumping from the nav to the content and back to the nav and stuff as they tab around, something like that. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. Number 6, so using sufficient color contrast. This is what I was kind of bringing up with the color scheme, which is beautiful. I just want to make sure we kind of just do a quick check to make sure that, especially like the white on the apricot color, is going to work. And there's, I think this is a link to a tool, a contrast checker that you can use to see that. And I'll share those slides in a minute. And then the last thing is not to use only color to signify state. So, if you remember back to when we were putting the list together and we said, you might want to put a color on the items in terms of if it's soon, kind of soon, not soon, but don't have that be the only thing that tells the user that it is, which state it's in. So this isn't an exhaustive list of these things, but it is a pretty good start. Like if you follow these seven things, your pages are going to be in better shape than most pages on the web. So any questions about any of these, like kind of the technical, like how to do any of these things or what they're useful for?
My only question would be, do you have like a favorite tool to put into the development process that helps you with that? I think that the one thing is that it's a tall ask to expect a developer to remember all of these things while they're going through and developing and doing all their other stuff. Like you just don't really have the mental bandwidth to always include that, but you want something to let you know when you didn't, right? So do you have like a linter, or are there other tools and that kind of thing that will spit out like, hey, by the way, you forgot your ARIA label, or your tab order is weird, or something along those lines. You know what I mean? Yeah, for sure. So tools is next, because y'all are developers, and so yeah, there's Axe is sort of the default industry standard automated tool for doing this. Axe is actually, if you go into the Chrome developer tools and you ask it to do an accessibility audit, it's actually Axe running in the background. It's behind, Accessibility Insights is an amazing plugin, which I'll show you in a second. It actually has Axe built into it as well. So it's really good for finding things that you can identify through static analysis. And what I mean by that is, here's an image tag, there's no alt attribute.
Like that's something that's very clear that needs to be fixed. But if you have an image and there's an alt attribute, Axe can't tell you whether the text in the alt attribute is correct, right? Like that, it takes a human to do that part of it. So that's why people estimate around, it only catches around 30% of the issues, but it is a really good start. It'll identify color contrast. Maybe there's two H1s on the page, like those kinds of issues. It'll raise those things. So it's a great place to start. It's kind of table stakes. You should have that built into when you get into your first jobs. We don't do this at Collab, but you should have this built into sort of your deploy pipelines, that you get just a readout of how many of this type of violation are there. At Zapier, we actually have this running. We have a channel for accessibility nerds, and weekly we get sort of a report of how, what's the average number of violations per page. That's that page that has been checked at Zapier, as well as a list of new violations. And then anyway, it's great to have automated tooling in place. Super important. Guided audits. So Accessibility Insights it's just kind of a browser plugin that Microsoft built, and it's amazing for we kind of like when you want to do a little bit more in-depth testing. So it actually has features that'll walk you through a whole bunch of different categories of things and links off to source documentation about what that the WCAG is how they pronounce the working group for accessibility, which sounds terrible, but anyway, the WCAG guideline for that violation. Anyway, it's a great learning tool in addition to being able to kind of surface different issues, including tab order. So I'll show that in a second. And then kind of the gold standard to me is audits by accessibility testers, the people who actually use this technology all the time. So there's a company I've worked with, Fable Tech Labs, who their job is to connect companies to these testers, sort of freelance testers out in the world. So like this guy Sam that checked our site a couple of years ago at Zapier. Just people. The nice thing about working with somebody like that is that he's been using screen readers forever. He's seen a million web pages. He kind of knows all the tricks for getting around, and he has his ways of sort of optimizing how he consumes the page. So whereas like you or I could turn on VoiceOver and muddle through trying to see what the experience is like, it's not very realistic, really. So someone who uses screen readers all the time, they probably are not. They're not just going to linearly go down the page, which I think is what we would all try to do. They're going to get there's a way that the tools have these things built in so they can get sort of an overview of the structure of the page first. And so they'd scan the structure for like, oh, that's the piece that I want to dive into. And then they go to that piece, and then they would read or maybe jump back out and go to another section. It's really wild to watch somebody do this because they go so fast. And they have, I think Sam had his speech, text to speech at like 200 words per minute or something. I mean, it was just blah, 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 and he's like, it would be through half a sentence, he'd be like, oh, that's not what I want. And he'd be jumping around and stuff. So it's really disorienting. I found it really disorienting for me. But it also kind of showed me that it's not, it's just not like you or I testing this is just not the same thing. It is helpful. It's better than nothing, but it's having somebody who does this all the time look at your pages is there's nothing better. Partly because, and the last thing I'll say about that is just like there's like compliance with accessibility standards, and then there's designing great experiences for people with assistive technology, right? So it's one thing to just make sure like, oh, there are no violations on the page, right? And that's great. It's like if you do that, it's so much better than most pages. But like the thing that the very, very few places actually do is to think of like, oh, somebody can't see the page, like what would be a good experience for them to consume this information. So UK.gov actually does probably the best job of any organization that I know of in paying attention to this stuff. But there are, or like somebody with a I don't know, anyway, like whatever type of disability, like just thinking of it from those terms, sort of like you've probably all used phone trees that are terrible. I know I have, and you've probably used ones that are pretty good. And there's somebody behind the scenes designing that experience, right? And that's, so anyway, that to me is kind of the closest analog that all of us have interacted with. But it's really hard. Like, you need design to be bought into that and product to be bought into that, not just developers in order to get to that point. So that's a journey that, like, I know I'm trying to push Zapier in that direction, but it's, you know, it's a long play. So yeah, you know, you're supposed to just like bang, 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 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then it connects you with a person, right? Maybe. Anyway, all right. So that's a lot of talking. Looking at time. So I'm going to do a little demo here. So I'm going to use Zapier's site. So just to put ourselves under the spotlight. Okay, so I'm just refreshing the page to make sure it's in the correct state. And then this is the Accessibility Insights plugin, like I mentioned. So Accessibility Insights, again, it's a Chrome extension built, well, I'm actually using Microsoft Edge, an Edge and Chrome extension that is built by Microsoft. It has all this, has a ton to it, but I'm just going to start with sort of this fast pass. So fast pass will give you a summary of the automated, like the checks that you can find through automated linting or whatever, static analysis, and then it gives you the option to use the tab stops as well. So I hit that and it pops up another window with just kind of a summary of the problems. So remember I mentioned earlier that like there's more to ARIA attributes than just slapping them on the elements. So this labeled by thing apparently can't be used for this type of element, I think. Let's see. So here's an area where like it was able to identify a problem, but there are 4 different ways you could fix it. So you know, there's a tab index on here, which is risky. Element does not have text that's visible to screen readers. So because it's got the roll of button, a div roll of button should almost always be a button tag, just for the record. It has no title. The label attribute does not exist or is empty. So it has this roll of button, but it would need an ARIA label in order to be, like there needs to be something for the screen reader to actually read. So I think, I'm not 100% sure, but when the screen reader got to this element, it would just announce button. But that's not super helpful. You don't know if the button is submitting the thing or canceling the thing, you know what I mean? So, or something in between or whatever. So anyway, so that's a bit of a problem too. So anyway, and there's some color contrast stuff. And this element has focusable descendants. So this is actually another thing is EJ Mason, who's one of our mentors, knows a ton about accessibility, and he talks a lot about how modals are a terrible idea, or they're not that they're a terrible idea, but they're really hard to get right. So there's something called a focus trap, which a lot of modals fall into, where the modal will take the user's focus to the modal, but then there's no way to get out and back to the page, or there isn't easily or something. So I think this might be related to that. Name your zap. So that element, you can focus on it, but you could also focus on something inside of it. And so it's going to confuse the screen reader. So those are just examples. I mean, this is just, one page, but, it's pretty helpful already. And yeah, like Mindy said, divitis, like tons of divs where we could be using more semantic HTML. So now for the tab stops. So we already refreshed the page, and then we're going to turn this tab stops thing on. Okay, and the circle here wasn't there before, and that's where focus currently is. And then if we start tabbing around, it's going to show us the order that the user, if you tab, that the user would kind of hit different elements. So, I mean, so far, so good, kind of. Like the whole, like you might expect to start with name your zap, I don't know. and then we go through these. And now, if you notice, we're actually up in the browser Chrome. So I have to go through a bunch of stuff. This is not related to the page. Tab, 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 tab. Until we get back to the Learn More link. And then we can go back to our list of zaps, and then we can name our zap. So then we can learn more again. And that's another problem, is that this is Learn More and that's Learn More. So what are we learning? Anyway, and then we're back to the beginning. But it's pretty helpful to kind of be able to visualize the order of those tab stops. If I were trying to design a better experience, I don't know if it's even possible, but I would probably try to have it not go through all the browser Chrome before it got back to the other stuff on the page. That's just me, I don't know. So yeah. So that's sort of the fast pass. I guess there's this needs review thing. But it's also, so they have the assessment mode, which this is where I was talking about, where you can learn a ton, because they'll go through, you can test each thing sort of independently. Can't remember what I checked. Keyboard navigation. Okay, so and then if you say you fail it or whatever, you can like add notes and like kind of annotate the page and everything. So, and then it see. Oh yeah, so it has a whole explanation of why it matters, how to fix it, examples, and then all the sort of a bunch of source documentation around that you could use to kind of teach yourself more about how this particular guideline works. So it's one of the things I really love about Accessibility Insights is it is a teaching tool as much as sort of a way for you to assess your sites.
So I am a little bit concerned about time, but I do have a question that I want to ask before we get moving on, which is, given our target audience here of early career developers who are likely going to land in a situation where they, you want to be an accessibility champion, but the odds of you landing in a company that is doing accessibility well are slim. And you're either going to be in a place that is barely 508 compliant by the skin of their teeth, or just not doing any accessibility stuff at all. And a lot of this stuff is daunting. It's overwhelming for people who are young in their career to really kind of be a guru on this stuff, and they probably don't know. So how would you advise people to go into a gig and be an accessibility ally, in the sense that you can push for these types of tools in a place that is not necessarily set up to accept them, which I think is important. Like, we've got to get people doing that, but it's a tough thing to ask, I think, of people a lot of times when they're just starting out in their career.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And there's sort of like what you're kind of exposing, that there are two ways that companies typically approach accessibility. There's sort of a top-down thing, like, oh, we got sued, and so now all management wants us to be everything to be accessible. And then there's the bottom up, which is there, people like the people on this call who are interested in this and passionate about it, kind of trying to teach themselves something about it so that we can actually just, in more of a guerrilla fashion thing, make our pages and products more accessible. I think the most successful companies have a mixture of both, where the leadership is bought into it, maybe not, more from the carrot than the stick or something, but and people, on the ground who are in there, trying to make things better. It's not like, I think the other thing I think I hear in that question is that you may not get rewarded for it at work, right? Like, you're a junior person and you're spending extra time on these things that aren't that concerned to the business or something, right? So I think in that case, you have to be a little careful to safeguard your career. But a lot of this, what it should be is just, this is the course of doing business, is to make sure you can get to everything from a keyboard, that that ARIA labels are in place, and you're using semantic. Using semantic HTML as a developer, you have a lot of control over that kind of thing. So, so I would, we're I'm finding this battle at Zapier, to be honest. Like it's, there's a group of us who are super passionate about it, and we're making proposals and trying to do with, kind of asking for things all the time. And it's just, the business isn't paying that much attention to it. So we just continue to push, and we do what we can. And when we have a hack week, we tend to like all get together and focus on it for a week. We try to, publish articles or send links out and things to just kind of seed the information a little bit. But it's a slow, change is coming pretty slow there. So.
And I can speak to it a little bit too, like as somebody who did jump into, I came into Collab Lab, and accessibility was a focal point. It was great, and I learned a ton. And then I jumped into my first job with a company that like just didn't do it at all. And there was discussion about it in the office. Like it was a thing that they kind of were like, we need to be doing this, especially it was kind of government websites almost. We were working with government agencies, and so like I think they're technically legally required to have this, right? And it just kind of wasn't. So that was a question and a discussion point, but it hadn't quite gotten into like, let's actually do this and like making a point of having that effort happen. It just was talked about. But when I got in there, like, if I had the opportunity to, if I needed to edit a page quite a lot, I would start adding in semantic HTML and just kind of convert stuff over as I had a chance to. And, like little stuff here and there really does, I think, like it helps. It doesn't get there all the way, but it definitely makes it a little bit better. So that was a thing. It actually has been interesting being at New Relic. I don't know that they actually focus on accessibility much at all. Like I don't actually work on the customer facing stuff. So I don't have as much insight into that, but I did ask during one of my intro weeks. So I was like, hey, dude, like what's the focus of accessibility? Like, how do you guys handle that? And they're like, we don't.
Oh, no.
And I don't know if that's like how much, I heard it from one person who knows if it actually is like that. Because again, I'm not involved in those particular things. So so that's the thing. I did work, there is something that was specific for our customers, which is the other developers in the company. And actually recently I noticed that there was a ticket for somebody who had requested to have a status that was indicated by more than just the color, which is one of the things that Andrew mentioned in the thing. And I picked that up. I was like, oh, this is great. I could totally do this. This should get done. Like this is important. So just taking the time to notice and prioritize stuff that you see that's accessibility if you can, and just jump in there and get it done.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's like, I think some people get paralyzed by like, oh, I can't make my site perfect, so I'm just not going to bother with it. But it's so much better just to do what you can over time and just try to like just make it a little bit better. And every time you do that, like somebody is going to be able to get to a piece of information that they wouldn't have been able to before. So.
Yeah, and something very quick to add at my company. So one of the things that I do is to focus on the component library design system. So at the end, something that we take like very importantly is to focus on accessibility of the UI components that the product engineers use. So something that we do is that before writing the code of the component, we create an implementation spec, like explaining all the props in React, all the props that the component will have. And we have a specific section for accessibility. So we read over the documentation and we try to add all the ARI elements that this component needs to have to happen in order to make it accessible. So maybe sometimes in product we miss some parts of accessibility, but at least the global components are already using accessibility in some way. So there's always a way to help with that. And I think that we are getting there. We are far from that, as everyone said, but I think that it's like taking baby steps that can help with that.
Yeah, I love that. Design systems are a great place to sort of in a high leverage way get some accessibility around those things that are commonly used across multiple projects, for sure. All right, that's it.
Yeah, and it is about 11, and I'm handling the issues for this week. However, there's not actually a new issue. So I don't know that we need to spend too much time on it. I was planning on going through a little bit just to kind of encourage y'all to, I think you're meeting later today, if I recall. I think I saw that somewhere, potentially. Or whenever you do meet. If you have a lot of time, like definitely do go through and just encode some stuff, but I also would recommend actually creating some issues. So blocking out or like creating tasks for people to do so you can work asynchronously, because otherwise it might be hard to get together again a few different times. So yeah, be open, or there's a word I'm looking for. I can't think of what it is.
Transparent, noisy.
All of those.
Okay.
But be confident in starting or creating new issues. Like they can be really tiny little issues. Don't worry if it's like, I don't know, something very small. That's fine as long as it makes sure it gets covered at some level or another. You can group stuff together. You can create as many as you want. Like it doesn't have to just be 2. Just be okay with doing that.
Last week we left it on kind of a fuzzy note in terms of what would need to happen over the next week, which I think was a little bit kind of the point. Like we wanted it to be a little open-ended, and we wanted people to kind of go and be, empowered to go and do that thing. But I think you've got a week left, and I think we want to also get some tangible results out there. So I know there was some talk, like Mindy was saying, about meeting later today or some other such. I don't know, were there actual concrete plans to do that, or was there just kind of talk about making that happen? Because if there's not some concrete things, it might be good to have at least a couple of concrete goals walking away from here that we can execute on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Is there something that either of you would be like, I'd love to have this particular thing done by this particular day, or something like that?
Sorry,
I was going to say, I think Taryn and Adam maybe had said they were going to connect in the afternoon. I can't connect this afternoon, but I definitely love, Mindy, your idea of like actually creating issues. Like that sounds awesome. And like, I think that's definitely easy to start doing. So yeah, maybe if we have I don't know, maybe communicate with the others. That's going to be a big challenge too. Just like say, hey, Monday, Tuesday, let's throw up all our issues on there.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you can always add, it might need to be a bit more organic. But yeah, I think getting some deadlines would be nice, just so, yeah, people can chime in.
I agree. I mean, yeah, we kind of talked about meeting today, but I guess with Taryn and tomorrow both busy now, that's probably not going to happen. That's fine. So I was going to say, I mean, if you want to, maybe tomorrow morning we can kind of all meet and put it and like talk through and make like plan and write up the issues. If you're free tomorrow, I can make any time. But and then we can get it started, and hopefully tomorrow and Taryn can join in too. But yeah, or not, or we can just do it personally. I don't mind. But I think it's good. I think you're right. We should just like put stuff on the board, get on it basically.
And I'll say a couple things along those lines too. Like I think like it's nice to have everybody, but if you can't get everybody, do what you can. Make decisions with as many people as you have connections with. Also, or have you connections with? Words are hard. Anyway, do that, and then also if you have, sometimes there are some decisions that like you want to get consensus on from everybody. Like, yes, let's do this, and sometimes you might not get that just from time wise, right? So there might be a few decisions here and there that like you have 2 people are like, this looks good to us, we like it, let's go ahead and do it. And then you can ask for feedback from the rest of the group, like, hey, how does this look? Do you have any suggestions? Like kind of just don't feel like you need unanimous decisions on all of the different pieces of the design, if that makes sense too.
And yeah, those are good points. And one more thing, I'm hosting office hours this week. So maybe if you want to, you can take that space just to organize on those tickets. Maybe you can work on that. I can help if you need it, just to get some alignment or some direction if you need to. Not direction in terms of that I have to do direct this, but just to help. So maybe that could be helpful. I don't know. Yes, I'm gonna post a link for Doodle. Is there any time preference that you have for office hours, or maybe after hours? Because I guess that you are busy during the day with work. So
Yeah,
I'm just
usually in
gonna,
the mornings or evenings are good for me personally. But I think Taryn prefers mornings, she said. So yeah, a lot of morning times would be great.
okay, so mornings, okay, but you are in California, right, Vanessa?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, we have to check how that could
Balance
work.
the time zones, yeah.
Yeah,
I think Taryn's in East Coast time zone, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yes.
New York.
okay, so yeah, I'm gonna try to put multiple times this time. I usually put during the nights, but I'm gonna try to put some in the morning and find out something that works there.
Lyle, wait, actually, I'm not entirely sure how all this works. As far as the video for that gets recorded here, where does that go? And do Tamara and Taryn have access to that? Like, can we send a link out in the channel or something?
Yeah, so what happens is because it's mine and I'm the one who hit record, it'll record and download onto my machine, and then I will need to upload it. And that takes a minute, and sometimes I walk away and go get distracted by butterflies and do other stuff. I'll be more attentive to that today and put it up like as soon as it's done downloading to make sure that that is available since not everyone is here. So I'll make sure that
Thank you.
And it's totally valid to divide and conquer on this too. If the first step is to put things into issues. So, maybe somebody could pick up like just styling the nav, and somebody could pick up the add item form, and somebody could pick up the welcome screen. But that way, individuals could even like pick up pieces of it and just, apply. I think as you said, material UI is what you're using. So apply that to that page or that view. And maybe there's another task that is, I think I'm not sure how material UI works, but like setting up some global styles within material UI. Is that how you do that? So maybe that's one task, and then everyone just starts applying it to different pieces of the app.
Yes, you can do that, I'm pretty sure. Yes.
Okay.
Awesome. Do we have any final questions before we wrap up for today? Questions, comments, concerns?
Just a thank you. Again, you guys have been really supportive. And Andrew, thank you so much for your talk. That was really like energizing. I really want to dive in. So thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you very much. It was really interesting, Andrew. It's really good to get a clear view of all of that. And yeah, thank you everyone for all your help as well. And cheers. Have a good Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. We'll see you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.